Donna Rice Hughes, great to see you on Zoom. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Pod's Honest Truth podcast.
Thank you, David. It's so good to be with you.
Let me ask you, let's start obviously with what everybody's been talking about, the news of the day, COVID-19. First of all, personal note, how is everybody over where you are? Is everybody safe and okay at this point?
We're doing good. We're doing virtual office 24/7, it seems like, right now in Northern Virginia. My husband and I and our kids and grandkids are in California. Everybody's locked down and hopefully practicing social distancing and doing everything that the White House and the CDC is telling us to do.
Right. And I know that the Department of Justice has also weighed in on this because there's this idea, obviously, with kids at home more and parents have to be more vigilant, and talk to me a little bit about the internet and pornography and child exploitation, because this is what, in essence, you have devoted your life to and your organization is all about. So tell me a little bit about what some of the dangers that could be out there during this COVID-19 crisis that we're going through.
Yes, David, since we're talking about and everybody's thinking about COVID pandemic, there are other epidemics and even pandemics, I would say, with respect to the dangers that our children are being exposed to and are vulnerable to all the time on the internet. And they have free and easy access to hardcore pornography. This is not the old softcore variety that was way back in many, not that too far along generations, but they're exposed to extreme content now, and it's looking for them. So kids can accidentally come across this. Also, sexual predators and sex traffickers, I include those in the same category because they use the same tactics. They are looking for vulnerable children constantly, and where kids play, predators prey. And so the fact now that kids are at home more, they may be using technology more, means that parents need to be even more vigilant. And it's a great opportunity, if you will, for parents that are so busy when the kids are in school and running them to practice and this, that, and the other, whatever it is that they're doing, to now take the time to reset with their kids and what their kids are doing online, because their kids are in fact vulnerable. Doesn't matter how good they are, how smart they are, how much of a leader they are in their groups at church. The reality is these dangers are there because we have an open internet, and that is up to the parents to actually scale back that access by using the safety mechanisms and the technology tools that are available to them to make sure their kids are having a safe and rewarding experience and using the internet for all the great things that it has to offer, which are abundant, just like even Zoom. And all the things that we're using now, but also to safeguard them from the dangers online. And they are large and growing. Child pornography images, for example, are exploding. They have exploded. There are over 45 million that were reported last year. Those are just the ones that are reported. And many of these kids are very young, children and infants. And we know from the Department of Justice that they cannot prosecute their way out of this. We're trying to get them to start to prosecute the hardcore obscenity laws, which they haven't done since John Ashcroft was in under Bush 2. So really a lot of the burden does fall on the parents, and we've got all the information they need to learn how to protect their kids at internetsafety101.org.
So Donna, when you mentioned safety mechanisms, and for parents listening out there, what are you referring to? I mean, I'm assuming filters, but there's more than just filters out there.
Absolutely. We break this down into common sense safety measures for the parents to take. We call those the rules. They're not the rules for the kids, they're the rules for the parents. Let me just run through a few of those. And that is spending time online with your kids and having regular conversations and communications with your kids. So if your kids are online every day, you need to be having regular conversations with them every day. Who are you talking to? have you friended somebody else if they're on social media? By the way, the age break there is 13. So if they're under 13, they should not be on social media. And even then, it's not terribly safe, but we can talk a little bit about apps in a minute. If they're playing games, same thing. The games are usually connected to the internet. So if you only want your child to play games with people that you approve, we call that a parent approved gamer list or buddy list, and that should also be the same in social media. The parent needs to be approving who that child can communicate with online, whether it be gaming, social media, or just by email, right? Because they're dangerous people, just like they're good people and good and safe people out there. Right. So those are two of the most important things. If you do allow your kids to play games or to go on social media, as the parent, be on those sites as well. Get to know them and decide for yourself if you think that they're safe, and if your child is mature enough and responsible enough to use them, and to also abide by the house rules that you lay down for them to keep themselves safe. Now, on the technology tools, these are just as important. Parents need to use the parental control tools that are available to them. Now, for instance, the gaming devices have their own parental control tools. We always recommend, at a minimum, turn on the filters. They work. Turn on the monitoring technology. That allows you as the parent to often get a report card and see what your kids are doing. They're trying to break out of that filtering, for instance, and set time limits. Again, very, very important. So all of this is magnified because everything in our life right now is magnified. So we get an opportunity as parents to reset with our kids, to have these conversations and to learn this technology, because really you've got to be a good cyber parent. And if you're not willing to do that, then I recommend that you do not let your kids use a lot of the technology that's available to them, because it really comes down to the parent.
It's interesting because that was kind of transitioning my next question about parental involvement. I mean, parental involvement is obviously crucial to all of this, and we're living in the day and age in our society, and you've seen it. You've been in this long enough to know that society is changing. Parental involvement is becoming less and less.
Right.
How much of a struggle is that, especially in this day and age now?
Well, there's always that balance between using technology for all the good and beneficial ways that it can be used. That's terrific, but then also balancing that to where it doesn't become addictive, your kids are not in danger, and that there's just that good balance. And now is the perfect opportunity to really practice those time limits with the technology. Get your kids out. It's springtime most places in the United States. Get them out more and learning how to be active and have real communications outside. Learn how to play outside and do those kinds of things. And one of the things that I just recently wrote about is the silver linings in this whole pandemic that we're dealing with. We now are spending a closer amount of time with our friends if we're social isolating, and we need to make sure our kids are doing the same thing. So we can teach them a lot about that, and getting back to the basics, and learning to show kindness. I think that where we are now, just for instance, practicing social distancing is a wonderful way to be intentional about showing kindness and applying the golden rule to everyone that you come into contact with. This is so key, because so many people I'm seeing as I'm out there, I go to the grocery store occasionally, they're not practicing all of these things. And it concerns me a great deal. So we've got a good opportunity here, and also to get back to the basics of just family, God, family, and friends. And we can use the technology to connect with family. Think of what a blessing that is.
Yeah.
If your kids can't see the grandparents because they're in that high risk category, you can Zoom, you can FaceTime, you can Skype, you can use the technology in all these wonderful ways.
I want to ask you about your work with the Department of Justice. I mean, let's be honest. I'll say it, you don't have to. You've been a trendsetter in this business. Internet Safety 101, the program adopted in essence, by the Department of Justice, and it is everywhere that you look. What has that relationship been like back to John Ashcroft, to at this point, during this administration with Jeff Sessions and now Bill Barr? What's that relationship been like? I know every time we try and talk, you're like, I'm at the Department of Justice, so you're there, you're there quite a bit. Tell me a little bit about that activity.
Well, I have to say that I'm very, very pleased with this Department of Justice. I believe that Attorney General Barr is the man for this job because, like I said at the beginning of our time together, David, we're thinking about the pandemic of COVID-19, but there's a pandemic of child sexual exploitation on the internet. It's not just in this country, it's worldwide. And we actually wrote the Children's Internet Safety Presidential Pledge in 2016. And we asked candidate Clinton and candidate Trump that if they were elected, to appoint an attorney general that would aggressively enforce all the existing laws on the books to better protect children in the digital world. And we also asked the president to advance new policies that are needed to fill these loopholes in the law. And we've seen with this Congress and this administration so many new policies with respect to sex trafficking, child pornography content, we call that child sex abuse images. Now what we're really pushing for is to get this Department of Justice to aggressively enforce the obscenity, and that's the hardcore graphic content. And kids, David, I'm sorry to say this, I know that this is another scary thing, but you've got to hear this. Kids as young as 10 years old, 8 and 10 years old, make up about 25% of the porn users of the under 18 category.
Wow.
And I know it's crazy. And 10 to 14-year-olds make up 36% of the under 18 category. And they're not looking at the soft stuff. They're looking at sexual assault content. They're looking at violent content. They're looking at anal sex. This has become their sex education model, and they are modeling this behavior. So we've got to recognize that we are in a spiritual war. Yes, we have got to get these laws enforced because we're the top producer and distributor of this content in the world, and it drives demand for trafficking victims. It drives demand for the child sex abuse images, and it's driving so many things, and it's straight from the pit. And so it's a spiritual battle. We need to pray about this, use all the tools that we just talked about for parents to use. And then we also are asking companies and businesses like Starbucks and McDonald's, we just had great victories with them recently, asking them to voluntarily filter child sex abuse images and this extreme pornography on their Wi-Fi networks. And so we were asking colleges to do the same thing and all the industries to do this because we need those layers of protection. And I can tell you one of the things that excites me most about the silver linings of COVID-19, it's hard to think about that because real people are getting sick and real people are dying. When we talk about flattening the curve, those are real people, right? With real families who love them and are suffering horribly. But we have seen a model work with this where the private sector and the government sector, Congress can actually work together. These are unifying issues. Fighting COVID, protecting kids online, they're unifying issues that do not divide us. And so that we can tackle other issues in our culture once we get past this, because now we see that it works, and it works well when we all roll up our sleeves and take it seriously as we need to.
Donna, on the obscenity laws or the enforcement of the obscenity laws, how much of a heavy lift is that over at DOJ? I mean, do you get a sense that you're making headway, or how much more headway needs to be made? Is Bill Barr on board with something like this?
I believe he is on board, but as you know, Bill Barr has not been in for that long, and he's been drinking out of a fire hose since he has been. And this is one of the things that I find most troubling about the divisiveness of our partisan politics, because it has actually prevented our elected leaders and our appointed leaders from really being able to do the job of the people. And one of those is to enforce the rule of law and not constantly be putting out fires all the time. So he's prosecuted these kinds of cases when he was the attorney general before. He cares about it, and he's a new sheriff in town. This is a tough guy. I mean, you want him in this role. I think he's terrific. And so the thing right now is to get them to figure out how to allocate their resources and their prosecutors to be able to do this. And what we have seen is that members of Congress and the House and the Senate have sent letters to AG Barr asking him to start bringing these obscenity prosecutions. And they've cited the Children's Internet Safety Pledge that Donald Trump signed. It's on our website. You can just go to enough.org. And that was so successful, David, that we also launched the Governor's Pledge. And the governor of South Carolina, Henry McMaster, is partnering with that on that pledge with us. And we're reaching out to all the governors in the United States. We also have a state attorneys general pledge to do the same thing. And we have 16 AGs. We have a Democrat and a Republican AG co-leading that effort with us. So we've got to have everybody on board, just like we're seeing with this pandemic with COVID. You see what the federal government can do, you see what state governments can do. And when you're talking about preserving and protecting the innocence of our children from traffickers, from pornographers, from sexual predators who enjoy raping children, you know, I mean, this is not happening overseas, it's happening here in the United States. We've all got to be all hands on deck on this.
I have to ask you, I could go into a whole culture war situation there on that question. We don't have time. We'll come back. We'll do that another day. But I do want to ask about this president. He signed the pledge. Hillary Clinton said she would. What did she say? She said she
supported it with a letter. She didn't sign pledges. Right. But she did support it with a letter. And so we gave her all the kudos that we did with Donald Trump, because look, this is nonpartisan. I say it's bipartisan, but it's really nonpartisan.
You know, it's always been. Well, it's interesting because I'm wondering what kind of if not pushback. I mean, there he is signing the pledge, and he's Donald Trump, and he's had a past, if you know what I'm saying. And you're in this internet child pornography area. And I wonder if that was any consternation, or at least any pushback that you got as it relates to Donald Trump, because I'm just wondering about how he's been so far as president in your view on this.
He has really, it's been amazing. It's not just Donald Trump. It has been the First Lady who's taken up cyberbullying and internet safety. Ivanka Trump has been the warrior, the champion within the White House just on trafficking alone. And so, and just remember, when we wrote this, we asked for the aggressive enforcement of sex trafficking, child pornography images, sexual predators, and obscenity. So the Playboy kinds of content and everything that he was on the cover of years ago and everything, that's not part of this, because that's protected speech for adults. But most of what's out there now on the internet is extreme, and it's prosecutable under our federal obscenity laws. And so we didn't get any pushback. So what the focus is now is for Barr to start bringing these prosecutions. And I've just been on the Hill, not that this is my job or anything, but talking to members of Congress, I'm saying they don't have the funding to do this. So we just wrote an appropriations request for the Department of Justice to get an increase in funding to prosecute these laws. And, you know, I was just down there by my little lonesome talking to leaders, like, you know, in Senator Graham's office, in Congressman Adderholt, who's the head of Commerce, Justice, State in the House. So, you know, we're going to get this done. Now's the time. We have to seize the moment.
Donna, one last question for you. It's the Dr. Phil portion of the show, and your faith. And I know it's so important to you. It's central to your life. And I just love the way, look, I grew up Jewish, right? Got bar mitzvah, the whole 9 yards. I figure God has a sense of humor, and that my liberal Jewish mother watches the 700 Club. So God clearly has a sense of humor. But, you know, obviously back in the day with the tabloids and all of that, and you had those headlines, and here you are, that Jesus is able to rewrite the first paragraph of our lives, and really the whole life. And I'm just wondering what you make of what he's done for you, and how that journey has been for you.
Oh, it's been an incredible journey. And David, I have to say, you're right. A lot of people came to know me in the 1987 scandal, just call it what it was. And my whole life fell apart. I was 29 years old. And here's what a lot of people don't know. I was a serious born again Christian in middle school, high school, and college. And I was in youth group. I was a summer missionary. I love the Lord. I dated Christian guys. And I, like so many, once they graduate from college, I went prodigal. But there were some things that happened that I think was kind of prompt, were catalysts for me getting into a prodigal lifestyle. And one was I lost my virginity when I was date raped right after college. And I had also been sexually abused as a child. I never thought those things would impact me, but I started making some really bad choices. Ended up in the middle of this scandal, and my everything just fell apart. Everything but the foundation that I had in my faith and my wonderful family and my old Christian friends who came around me. And I just say, God, I don't know how you're going to deal with this, because everybody said, take the millions of dollars and run, because no woman has ever survived and been taken seriously and had credibility after something like this. And I said, well, no woman, but I'm going to be the first with God's help. And so I went underground for years, just refocused, built the foundations back up. I knew God's promises were true because I knew them. And so I knew that he had plans for me, plans for good and not for evil. I knew that he would cause all things to work together for good to those who he had called. And I was a daughter of the Most High God then. And so I came back to him, and slowly but surely over 7 years, he eventually brought me to work on this issue, which I talk about God's sense of humor. Hello, right? I had been Miss Scandal Queen in 1987, and he calls me to actually help launch an internet safety movement to protect children from sexual exploitation, pornography, all of these things. And we actually started that on Capitol Hill, flanked by members of Congress in the United States Senate and the entire media corps who had destroyed my life. And God used that and put me right back out there fighting this issue. And it brought restoration in my life. And my prayers have been answered, because I wanted the pain, I wanted the devastation in my life to count for something bigger than me. That was my prayer. And it did, and it has. And we're still out there on the front lines, just duking it out all the time, just knowing that at some point, we're going to turn the curve on these issues that are confronting our children.
What a wonderful story. Always fighting the good fight. Donna Rice Hughes, a breath of fresh air. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Thank you again.
Thanks, David. It's good to be with you.